Welcome to another video in my series about how you can use the KNIME Community Hub team plan to automate workflows and schedule them and deploy them. And today I want to show you how you can actually build a data app and run it on the team plan. What I plan to do today is to take my machine learning algorithm or workflow from the last video, where I started tackling the Kaggle Titanic challenge, and to turn that into a multi-page data app that I then deploy onto the KNIME Hub. That means that we will be adding interactive widgets that the user can interact with to the workflow, and we will also split the workflow into different components, which allows us to create a user interface flow. After that, we will deploy it onto the KNIME Community Hub on the team plan, and we will run it in ad hoc execution mode. And as a bonus, at the very end, I will show you how you can make your data app much more visually appealing by adding a data app header. Okay, let's change to KNIME, and I've already copied across the full logic of the Titanic decision tree workflow from my video a few weeks ago. Right now the goal is to break this overall workflow down into different steps, where each step will represent and be wrapped into its own component. And this component can then be executed in the order in that they are linked when we deploy this as an interactive data app on the Community Hub. In order to make sure that there are bits and pieces that we can change, I want to add the following interactivity. I want the user to be able to choose which columns to include as features and which not. And I want the user to be able to define how to split the data set into train and test, so the percentage. Then I also want to add some automation. So you may remember that last time around I had to look up what the optimal number of records per node was and had to enter that into the second decision tree learner manually. That I want to automate. So first the user selects the columns to use as features and the partitioning percentage. Then the parameter optimization loop runs and determines what is the best minimum number of records per node to use. And then all those parameters are passed in a second step to the second decision tree learner to train the final model and make the final predictions. And last, I think I want the user to be able to decide the file name, and if we find time, I want the user to be able to download the submission in the format that is required. So without further ado, let's start making some changes. Okay, I've just moved the workflow a little bit to the side, and now let's think about how we can add the first bit of interactivity, which is the column selection. So selecting columns that should be used as features for the decision tree learner. One way to do this is to use a multiple selection widget, which you can use to select multiple options at once. And in order to feed this multiple selection widget with the right choices, we first need to define which columns the user should be able to choose from. This is being done by adding these 4 nodes. So to start with, there is a column splitter, and this column splitter allows to split the main table, which includes our target column, which is survived, into 2 tables. The upper one does not include survived, and the bottom one does include survived. We will add the survived column back to the selected data set later on. If we execute that, the survived column is gone. Next, we use the extract table spec node to get a table that includes all the possible column names that are still included in this table. After that, we send this to a group by node, and this group by node actually doesn't group by anything, but in the manual aggregations tab, we've selected the column name column and aggregated using the method set. If I execute that, you will see that we get a column of type set, which includes all the column names in these square braces. So that is a list, or in KNIME you also call it a set. Next, we use the table row to variable node to turn that set into a variable. So now we have a string array type variable of name, column name with these values. And this flow variable we can now pass to the multiple selection widget. And under flow variables, we select this variable under possible choices and also as default value. So by default, all columns will be selected. We will not allow for re-execution, but we will add a refresh button later on. Because otherwise, whenever you move a column from left to right or right to left, the workflow will trigger and will execute. And from my perspective, from a usability perspective, it's much better if the user sees that he has to press a button once he's finished with configuring everything. Okay, the next step now is to use the selected columns. Let's just maybe change the selection a little bit. Let's remove the name and the ID and the ticket and the fare, for example, and apply these settings temporarily. So now we go from what was 11 columns here to 7 columns selected here. So now we need to turn this into a set variable again so that we can use it in this column filter node down here. The procedure is the same. We use a group by node to aggregate the column features by the method set. That way we get this column with a set. We turn that into a variable again to get a string array type variable, and that we pass to our column filter. And the column filter is a modern UI node. So to get to the flow variables, you right click, configure flow variables, and in this user interface we select our created variable as included names. If we execute this, you see that we go from 12 columns here, so that's still the survive column, and those that we've deselected here, to the 7 columns that we've selected. So now, of course, we need our target column still. That's why we add a column appender node where we connect the second port, the bottom port, from our column splitter, which contains the survive column, and we add it back in. So now we have 8 columns, and with this selection, the rest of the workflow will work again. Next, let's think about how we can add the percentage for this partitioning node. Let's just open it up. So we want to define how many percent of the overall data set goes to training and the remaining part goes to test that we then use to evaluate. Okay, in order to pass a percentage into the partitioning node as a flow variable, we first need to work out whether we need to pass in an integer, so the number 80 for 80%, for example, or maybe a double, so 0.8 for 80%. And in order to do that, let's inspect the flow variables tab a little bit closer. So right here, it is not immediately obvious which one we could use. So what I like to do in those cases is I create flow variables so that I can inspect further down. So I simply label them A, B, C, D, E, and F. And then after executing this node, I can inspect the flow variable stream. And I see my variable names that I've given. And it looks like it's a double type and it's whatever we have labeled as C. So that's a fraction. So right now we can't do that. I wonder whether that is because there is no compatible flow variable in the stream. So let's find that out. Let's go and grab a double widget. This will be the brain test split. And we will have a minimum of, let's say 0 and a maximum of 1. And the default will be 0.8. Let's execute that and let's pass it to one of the preceding nodes. And let's see whether this node activates. Yes, it has activated. So now we use our variable test split. We can remove all the other ones. And we've just sorted this out. So if I now change this to 60% temporarily and execute, then let's see. Has it changed? So now we have at the top, yeah, it definitely has changed. Let's just remember 534 column rows. And now if I change it back to 80, we'll have many more. Yep, 712 works. So that is how we can add our second widget. Next, let's split this into its own component. So my plan right now is that we have one page where the user makes a column selection and chooses the percentage. So that's all that goes up to here. And after that, I'd like to see a view of the outcome of the optimization. So that would be these nodes here. And then last, I would like to train the model and to start with just output the scorer. So if we now have to select the nodes, then this probably goes to our first component. So let's select all of this, click create component. And for now, let's just label it one parameter selection. And then the next piece would be our optimization loop and the scoring. So the second component will be these type of nodes inside the parameter optimization loop. Let's execute this once and see what the overall output is. So the parameter optimization loop end has one table with the best parameter and then one table with the results of all the runs. What I want to do is I want to visualize all the values in a chart. And to be honest, the decision tree view, I think that is better suited outside of the loop and inside the main component once we've trained our final model. So let's move that here and reconnect. The other piece that I want to extract is obviously the best value as a variable. So let's take care of that. To start with, we use another table to variable row node. And what we need here is the minimum number of records. And that one we need in the decision tree learner. Under flow variables, we will use it to steer the minimum number of records per node. Okay, so that should work. So then we just need to find a way how to visualize this. And for that, let's grab a generic eCharts node. Make a simple scatter plot out of that. Good enough. So then we can now go ahead and select the nodes for our second component. Create component. And this is our second step. Training and evaluation. One thing that we need to be mindful of is that once we turn something into a component, any variable that gets created inside of that will stay inside of it unless we change that. So let's navigate inside the component. And at the component output port, click on configuration and move the variable that we need outside of this component, which is the minimum number of records, into the green box. If we now re-execute, you will see that the variable is available and we can use it in the decision tree learner. Go. Okay, so we are almost done. Just one last component to go, which is the component that trains our model, our final model, using the optimized parameter, applies it to the data set that we need to submit, and creates a downloadable file in the right format. So first of all, we want to give the user the opportunity to enter the name of the file. So we can do that by using a string widget. The string widget creates a variable selected file name, so as file name, and the default value is output. So now we need to generate a path, a folder, where this file can be saved by the CSV writer. For that, we use the create temporary folder node. And what we can do here is we create a variable output name, which creates a folder with a unique ID, and the file extension will be CSV. And as additional path variables, we pass in the file name that the user entered, and that will be used to define the location where our CSV file will be saved. So if I execute this, we now have the output name, which is a relative path with /output.csv. And we then connect that to the CSV writer and select this as the input variable. So after that, we are almost done. We just need to pass this to a download widget. The node is the file download widget, and all we do here is in the configuration dialog, change the label and so on, and select again the path where the file was saved. So to make sure that all of this properly works, what we'll do is we will outsource this and the writing. Hang on, we are just going to outsource, yes, the writing and the widget to a separate component, and everything else we will wrap into a third component. One last thing that we need to do is we obviously need to make sure that the columns that we're collecting here are the same that we have selected up here. So that means that we will need to make the variables that we've created accessible down here. So how am I going to do that? I create a connection, variable connection between our first component and the CSV reader. And then I go inside the parameter selection node and make everything available. So what we really need is the features column only. So now the other thing that I can do is just check, okay, we just need to apply that to the column filter. And now all that we have to do is to navigate back out to the main component and to set up the flow variable in our column filter node. As the column filter node is a modern UI node, we'll have to right click it and configure flow variables. And then under column filter, select under included names our string array type variable. Okay, brilliant. That seems to be executing. So what we can do now is turn everything into components. So to start with, let's select our third component, which are all of these nodes plus where we write things. Component. Let's make sure that the variables that we are passing in are being let in. Let's check if there's anything that needs to go out. That's definitely the file name. And is there the output name? And then we can create our last component. Here as well, let's make sure that the variables are being let in. Awesome. So this should actually be all we need to do to make this work. Let's next look into how to deploy this to the Community Hub on a team plan. So in order to get this deployed, let's navigate to this workflow, right click and reveal in Space Explorer. That will open the folder and highlight the workflow. Then we right click and go to upload. And here we then open the Community Hub. And if you are on a team plan, then you will not only see your private space, but also your team. And here we can then select one of the spaces that I've created. I'll go for the test space 2. Select reset workflow before upload. And then we are sending it to the hub. So once that has been done, you go to home, select your team, go to the space where you've uploaded it, right click and go open in hub. And that is where now you can execute this by simply clicking run. Now it takes a moment and then we can see how this actually works. The first time executing this will take a little bit because my execution resources are shut down and they just need to start up. So that happened. Now if I click on this open button here, a new window will pop up with my data app. So here I have the column selection and the train test split. So let's remove everything. I want passenger class, sex, age, and let's maybe take the cabin. Let's do the train test split 2.7 and let's click next. Now the next component executes and we can see the scatter plot. So the features that I've selected do not seem to have been ideal. It looks like that this probably 7 minimum number of records is the best that we could do. Let's go next. So now I have my decision tree that I can click through. So that's one of those views. And I can change the file name. And if I now click next, I get to my download submission. And if I click here, it downloads it straight away. Let's open it. And it has the correct file structure. Awesome. One last hack or tip as a bonus I want to give you that will allow you to make your data apps deployed on the Business Hub or the Community Hub on the team plan much more visually appealing. So that's good for user experience. Let me navigate to the app that we've just deployed. And what we can do is we can give each of these components a header. So let's start by navigating into this one. And what I want to grab is a so-called data app flowchart to start with. So the way that you get that is, let me open my browser. You go to the Community Hub and go and search for data app flowchart. That's what the component is called. You can then simply drag and drop via this handle into your workflow, and that will move this component in here. So what you then need is a table creator node, and I'll just grab this from here. You can also just load that data in however else you like, but this is how the KNIME team shows that in the demos. And what you can do here is you can define the steps in one column and whether the step is active. So whether the placeholder for that step should show as active, and you will see what I mean once I deploy this. So let's modify this. This is step 1, parameter selection. So I've just finished typing the 4 steps, one for each component, and we are right now in parameter selection, which is why we want that to be active. If I execute that and connect, then because I've taken the headers from the example, this should almost immediately work. Let's just go configure. You see that you have a bunch of options already. Select step name columns, so that steps, whether it's active or not, that's active. We could also enable shortcut. I won't play with that yet. You can provide images, but that needs to be in base64 data URI format. And you can customize colors. We will leave that for default for now. Apply OK. Let's see if it executes. And this will pretty much give us a header that looks like that, where for every step, when we are in the first step, it will put the yellow circle around that, second step around that. So that makes it much more nicer. The second piece that I want to grab is a data app header. So I grabbed that from one of my Just KNIME It submissions because I have my logo encoded here already. So that looks like that. And this one we will just modify. So let me copy this. In here, you can also find that on the KNIME Hub data app header. And if you want to see examples on how that is being used, then you just scroll down, and at the bottom you see related workflows with demonstrations. You may actually somewhere also find my Just KNIME It submissions here, but that's okay. Let's go back to KNIME. And let's quickly modify this one. The rest I leave as default. Let's see whether that looks good. Yep, all good. And now we just go to the layout editor and let's move the flowchart there and the data app header to the very top. So app header with the logo, then the flowchart, and then the selection widget, and below that the double widget. So we leave it at that. And what I then do is I just copy these three elements and quickly move to the different other components. Okay, so now to make sure that everything works, we will execute this, check this, looks good. Then do the same here. Okay, so here we need to go to the layout editor. We can also do that from outside the component. Just right click, component, open layout editor. And here this eCharts node was a little bit too large for my liking anyway. So let's restrict it to, let's say, 550 pixels. And then we obviously move the other pieces up as well. Well, let's move this down and then let's move this up. So header, flowchart, eCharts view. Okay, that's good. Let's check it again. That does it for me. So because I've done all of this on the workflow that I've deployed already, so this is my one of my spaces on the Community Hub, I can just reset, save. Will then prompt me whether I want to overwrite, so we do that. And now that that's done, I can navigate back to the hub and run this. And once this runs, we should have a very nice looking data app. Let's open it and check it out. There we go. What a beauty. I mean, I don't know why my logo isn't displayed here. That's something that I need to sort out, but that's okay. Let's go class, sex, age, and let's maybe check fair, whether that gives us any better results. Let's go next. Okay, we get close to 0.7 with 6. Let's go next. Oh, good. Here we have our decision tree again, so let's go next. And yeah, that is how it works. We can download again. The last thing that I do in this video is quickly go to my execution resources. It's right now running, so that means it's consuming credits, and I'll hit the stop button. So now it's going to shut down once this last job is done, and that will wrap up today's video. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any question, leave a comment, and otherwise I will see you next time.